been on Inc. 500 for numerous years, Inc. 5000 for numerous years. I mean, I believe it was eight years on the 5,000.
8 years on all the lists. Yeah.
Yep. 8 years for all the lists. We started on the Inc. 500.
On the Inc. 500.
Yeah. That's the hard one.
That's incredible. Yeah.
It's also, it's really hard for a services company to make it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost predictable that a software company that is successful at selling software is going to make those lists because the growth and the scalability is so rapid, which is why they're valued at multiples of revenue in the marketplace. For a services business or regular business to business to make that list is pretty substantial. We ended up, and again, this is another Nick innovation, is he was sort of leading the future of the company, but he had to slow down our growth to be something that was manageable so that we had the time and space to be able to build the infrastructure necessary for the business as we went. We had 600% growth plus of that at the time we made the Inc. 500. Several years later, you kind of got us down to that 20% March over March that was a little bit more intentional.
It's my happy place.
What was the revenue like at that point?
What point?
When you're like go from not being on anything to being on 500.
Those are that's early, right? That's where we combined the businesses and then we sort of exploded from there.
Yeah, we hit the 500 in 2008, and then stayed on it for 8 years, and it was,
Let that sink in, guys. One more time. Say that one more time. You hit the Inc. 500 in 2008.
Yeah, and stayed on it for 8 years.
For 8 years
straight.
On the 5,000, yeah.
On the 5,000 list.
So, and that's, now you reflect, like, when you're in it, it's like a year by year thing. And like, I remember the first year we went to the conference and they're sitting there and they literally call all the 500 up onto the stage to get your award. But then they call everybody. They like recognize everybody that's there. And I remember they were talking about the Hall of Fame was people that have been on the list for 5 years. And I remember thinking, that would be really cool to be on the list for 5 years. And like one of the things that like a regret is we ended up being on the list 8 times. We only went 1 time. And like we never took the time to like slow down enough,
enjoy it,
to just like go back 1 time to like take a little victory tour when we're like on the list for 7 years or 8 years. And I think that's both that's like a strength and a weakness of the things that you do to grow a company is there's almost a lack of appreciation of the celebration. Yeah. It's just
right.
It just kind of is that way.
It's true. I mean, we're always, especially at the time, always busy. There's always stuff going on. It's hard to find the time. It's hard to really have the money that it takes to go down and do that even seem worthwhile, even though it's not that much money. But it from my perspective, it's you're going there for personal recognition in a sense, because we can do the press release that says we made the list from back here without me going on a trip to get an award. So
right.
Which we did.
I was never super big on going around and getting the personal recognition side of it. But that's just part of my personality. But that first year was
pretty fun, super fun,
and I'll always regret not taking my wife to that, because that was ritzy stuff. I mean, that gala, that's where people can wear.
I think I had to buy a shirt to be able to golf on that golf course.
Yeah, it was a really neat.
It was fun.
It's the kind of conference that only people dream of now in COVID times.
And I do dream of going to that, and I definitely I will someday, and that's definitely going to happen. But and as Five Nines has grown, you guys have taken some different paths, and you've continued to scale and continue to just grow this thing and have a very successful company. And had a lot of everybody that I've talked to about you, they all say like still amazing things every single day of who I talk to. And And it's interesting to see that, Nick, you've actually taken a different path now with your own venture. You want to like talk about that a little bit, about what that was like?
Yeah. And one of the things that I've always loved, and I have to say something before I answer your question directly. Having a business partner is hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. It is like having a second marriage, because you have this baby that you pour everything into, and I remember James and I set it up as a 50-50, and that was important for both of us because it said that forced us to always both be in alignment about where we're going. And the funny thing about our partnership was, James was extremely good at engineering. His ability to oversee and know and exercise his skill was transformational and a huge part of why we scaled. And he is by far the most purely entrepreneurial in the way he thinks and acts. I was always everything in between. James called it the magic. And in a way it was, right? Both of we did. And that's why it worked so well, is he could really focus on his core skill set of engineering. And he was the entrepreneurial check for where I sometimes wasn't super entrepreneurial.
Give me an example of that. What do you mean by that?
On the entrepreneurial side, James is the one that would think about the big bold moves, or James always understood ownership to a much better degree than I did, especially for the first 10 to 12 years. His understanding and even early on when we formed the company, like we were trying to figure out, I had a business partner in my first company. We were figuring out how to make that work. And James understood and knew how to value that future ownership much better than I did. I'm a middle child, so I'm always like, oh, let's just see if we can make everybody happy around here. James is like, no, we got to think about the future. It's just, he lived at the two edges. And he would think about those decisions very entrepreneurially. I thought about them operationally. And so the combination of those two things is always a big part of what worked. And so, I wanted to stop to say that because that's hard to find. You find a lot of dysfunctional people figuring out how to get rid of their partner, businesses that crash and burn because partnerships don't work. And James and I figured out how to be great partners for 12 years, and that's a long time.
Yeah. Plus, we were both all in. There was never a work ethic dilemma. There was never
literally all in.
Right. I mean, we're all in.
All right, come on.
Well, that's important.
No, but this is all right. I'm having fun with the word
story?
All in.
All right.
1 year in. No, not even 1 year in. James, I know I'm way off topic now, but this is way more fun. We're less than a year in business, and it was like probably some late. I don't even know how we pulled this off.
You're not talking
less than a year in.
The casino.
I'll tell the good casino story. Less than a year in, and James is like, I'm really good at blackjack.
James just got visually uncomfortable.
I'm like, that's good, because
Sure,
I had a little period in my life where I was a semi-professional poker player. So I'm like, let's go to the casino. So it's an afternoon, and I don't know how it was slow enough that we thought we could go to the casino, but we did. So we go to Council Bluffs to the Horseshoe, and we're there for like 3 hours. James is playing blackjack. I'm playing poker. And I mean, I have a good time in the poker room. I book a $400 or $500 win. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm texting James. I'm like, you ready to go? And he's like, yeah. So I walk out, and to get out, you have to walk. Poker room's like way in the back, hide those people.
The high stakes poker room.
So you walk out, and there's a crowd around a blackjack table that was generally where James described himself as being. And like all of a sudden I hear all this yelling. I'm like, okay. So I get to the blackjack table, and it turns out that James you asked how he was more entrepreneurial. Here you go. James had, since he knew it was his last hand, just decided to go all in for $1,500 at the blackjack table and got a blackjack.
No way.
And away we went. So I'm like feeling good about my 500 until I get over there and James is stacking up like 3750.
Yeah, 37. That's awesome.
Anyway.
Thanks for choosing that story.
You said all in. It's your
I love
fault.
that though.
It's your fault that we went there.
But that's really it. I mean,
I've spoken to people even recently that are struggling to figure out what to do in the business partner relationship. Mm-hmm. And the two things I will always tell somebody is it is like a marriage because unless you both exit at the same time, it ends in sort of a divorce type situation where you have to figure that out mathematically. The other thing to know is that it really only works if you both have the same sense of urgency going into it. You can't have a business partner, and I don't care how much, because remember, the ownership is more it's how risk of the company is divvied up every bit as much as it is how you say long-term ownership of the company might be divvied up, because your long-term ownership doesn't actually mean anything except for a control over distributions and things like that, and that only comes from whatever profit you might be able to make anyway. But the risk is always there. Mm-hmm. Everybody owns 100% of the risk, even if you only have 20% of the company. You still are risking 100% of what you got. So the things to keep in mind are that it's as serious as a marriage, and it's and you need the same level of urgency. So when I say we were both all in, I mean he didn't have a side gig and I didn't have a side gig, and neither one of us were dabbling with this. We spent 100% of our time in the 5-9s world, and that is, ownership doesn't stop at the end of the day, right? So it's a world you live in. It's a lifestyle, and it's not like the glitzy glamour that you think of with CEO ownership lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that the stress never dissipates. The things you have to worry about never go away. The things you have to plan on and be thinking about are always there. So you're living in this world together, and you need to make sure that you're both all in on it. Otherwise, the other person better be paying a bunch of money.
That's right.
Because if they're not going to be in for all the stress and everything else in the decision making, then they need to be providing a ton of money for that. So if you're moving together without anybody buying in, it's you either get ownership by paying for it or by being all in.
What's your thoughts on minority partners then?
Well, when we were 50-50, we didn't really have to think about it because one share to any other person would make them
the most important.
because
they were the tiebreaker,
right? So it was never a place for that.
Yeah. That's an interesting dichotomy, like how you have you're willing to split it up 50-50, like where it's kind of relatively generous between you two, like it's a even split, but then that third person, there's just like no.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the challenges in starting a company and growing it is there is that a lot of people, there's a desire for other people to want to be part of that, not just from the company, but from an ownership perspective. Mm-hmm. And again, this is one of the things where James was a really positive influence. Is there's a lot of people that want the upside of ownership without the downside of, or the commitment.
Preach.
And so that's, that's, people talk all the time about, well, I'm thinking about starting a business and with my 3 friends and it's like, okay, well, you just have to really make sure that you understand whether they have that ownership mentality, because a lot of times it doesn't work that way. And so a lot of businesses get tripped up really early because of that. And James was very focused on knowing what ownership, again, one of those things where he knew it a lot better than I did about what ownership looked like.
Yeah, I'd seen in the past, for most people, the job and quality of life comes first. And then the ownership would be sort of a nice positive on top.
Cherry on top.
in my past life, everybody I saw that had a great job and ownership all left the company for a better job anyway. And then their ownership just became a suck on the business after they left. So and I'd seen this in more than one spot. So the ownership to me didn't end up being the magic answer that the people that might even think it is. It just doesn't seem to be what matters the most. And then if you look at it from the flip side, everything I have and everything I'll ever have is on the line and at risk for the business. If I gave you a percentage of the company, that doesn't change my risk at all. No. It doesn't change that everything I have and everything I ever will have is at risk for the business.
It increases it.
Well, it does in a sense, because I don't know what you might do, and you could bring legal issues back upon the company.
Not me, really, but
no, not you.
Me hypothetically.
You'd never do that.
Well,
so feel free. Yeah.
So the moral is that the fact that the risk doesn't go down, and that the risk actually can elevate in a few ways, means that the whatever that is ownership becomes something that's pretty valuable. And so it just has to be treated with care. And I sort of, yes, on paper, I own the shares of the company, but I see it almost as I'm more of the steward of it. It is my job to make sure that the business continues to exist and flourish and do its thing. And as the steward of these shares of the company, I have full power to make sure that happens. If you start to split all that stuff up, then I lose personal control over the long-term direction of the thing, but I haven't lost any of my risk.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of putting that, and I appreciate that insight, because as a young company, obviously I'm sure you guys were inundated with requests or people that wanted to invest and they wanted to help you scale, and
the invest people show up all the time.
Right, they're never going to stop.
No.
Yeah. So.
And that's a really interesting thought of where you took that, though. But I do still want to talk a little bit about 31st Street and talk to me about what you're doing today. Yeah.
So, we had done this for 12 years, and that was
meaning 5 nines.
Yeah, we had done 5 nines for 12 years, and that was a long time for me. I'd done a bunch of different stuff before that. And James and I had talked a number of times over the years that eventually I was going to want to go do something else. And somebody had recommended a book to me probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it was, I don't even remember the name of it now, but one of the concepts was identify the end, figure out what the end looks like. And I had done that. And I as I checked that list, it was, one of them was value. One of them was knowing that the company would be great without me. And third was I knew that whether it was James and I both transitioning or just me transitioning, that 5 nines wasn't something that we wanted to sell externally. And so, all those things were in place. And part of that was also, James, that you can only have one CEO of a company. And James had always been willing to let me be in that spot. We had just, at our strategic planning meeting, if you remember that, we made that decision probably less than a year in. We're like, we can't be co-CEOs of this thing.
We literally had a big org chart with little lines connecting everybody.
Yeah.
And then you flip the page and I'm floating by myself, which allowed me to kind of jump in and help people in the moment, and also hang around for the strategic stuff.
Yeah. You're like Dr. Oz for a while there, though.
Yeah,
and it's not a great place to be. It worked for a while.
It was time.
Yeah, it was.
It was time. I was ready to go do something else, and quite honestly, I'm really happy to say this. Five Nines has been wildly successful ever since the day I stepped out of the door, which is a reflection of the company and a reflection of James's leadership. And so, and it was just time. It was time to be able to go out on the right terms and just do something else. And so
that's important though for people to know, is that you can make a successful exit that doesn't trash the company, that doesn't feel like a nasty divorce, that doesn't, like there is a good partner exit.
Yeah. And you'd have people like, I couldn't tell you how many people, did you and James, are you guys still talking? Do you ever talk to James?
I wondered. I wondered. I was curious. I was frankly, I don't know what
there's almost an assumption that
there is
that we might not be. Because that just seems to be what's fairly common out there. And it's also difficult for businesses to make the transition that we did. It's easier if you sell to some external private equity that has a boatload of money in the background, that they can play with. On our side, the business has to consume that on it, out of itself and out of what it's doing in the moment and in the future for a little ways. So it's not an easy thing for businesses to go through. We did. Put a good team together, and I think a lot of things have gone really well for us over the last couple of years, which ultimately put us in a pretty decent position for dealing with the challenges of 2020. But yeah, I mean, it was it was a transfer of risk, obviously, to I need to take on the entire risk of the company as things move forward, and that's a different mental and everything hurdle to go through, and then you have all that and things. I am really thankful and fortunate with where we sit today as a result of all that, because certainly if things had taken a nosedive after that point,
then I would have felt bad.
He would have felt bad, but it would have all been on me, because that's just the mechanics of how it works, right? So, yeah, it's
I'm not trying to dodge, I promise. So we did that transition. I really thought that I'm like, okay, I'm ready to take a break, and I thought I'd just buy commercial real estate, and checks would just start coming to the house, and it'd be great. And then just combination of couldn't find anything, and really just had to wait long enough to transition and get the feel for what we really wanted to do. And my wife and I talked about it. She transitioned out of her job at Lincoln Public Schools, and the more we talked about it, the more we're like, let's focus on the things that we love doing. And that really came down to working with leadership teams, helping people and companies grow. I've always been somebody that loves growth. And so we're like, maybe we should just look for a company to buy, or maybe a couple. And so we started looking, and found a lot of them we didn't like, and eventually found one that we really did like, which oddly enough was a flooring company in Phoenix. So I don't know anything about flooring, and I always joke with people. I'm like, you see these hands? These hands were made for diping. That's what I'm good at. I'm good at diping. So don't ask me to install some floors. But they had a great leadership team. They were big enough that they had critical mass, and we've owned that company for a year and a half, and they've done great. We grew 20% this year, which is awesome. Nice. Which is my sweet spot, happy number. And we've done two. So we created a holding company called 31st Street Capital, repping hard with the shirt and the Yeti. And I mean, if I could have just worn a hat maybe or something.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. So I have my 5 Nines one at home. Don't worry. So we made 2 additional acquisitions. We acquired a company called Color World House Painting here in Lincoln and Omaha. And then our most recent one is up in Minneapolis. We acquired a large 75-year-old flooring company called Flooring Expo, and 11 locations. So it's kind of a different beast than our Phoenix. But but we've got big plans for now. It turns out some flooring companies and house painting, and my wife and I get to do what we're passionate about, which is just we work with the leadership teams on a weekly basis, try not to get down in the weeds.
Yeah.
Let those leadership teams do what they do, but we get to kind of set the big picture of where we want to go. And now I'm happy to say we've got 2 full-time people at our holding company. Besides me, we found a rock star marketing person, and just recently hired somebody for a president integrator, if you're using the traction language, that really works with each of our companies. And we're setting some big goals for where we want to be. And it's just a new. It was kind of the refresh, just something completely different and new that was energizing and fun. So that's
cool. Yeah, I love that. And what gave you the idea to specifically start buying companies versus? I mean, did you just obviously you love working with the leadership team? You mentioned that, but when you're looking at these companies, is there anything specific you were looking at when you started buying, or what kind of triggered you there?
I mean, we knew that we wanted to buy large enough that they had a team. We didn't want to buy a job.
No.
So the first one was, my first idea around not buying a job was, let me see if I can find something that's absentee owned.
Right? So already owned by an absentee owner.
Yeah. So any involvement we have, my wife and I have in the business is just bonus.
Switching the stake.
And the first one was totally absentee owned. When we met with the owner and the leadership team, the guy who represented the holding company that owned it, was on his phone the whole time. So I'm like, this is a guy that is disconnected from the business. And so that was great. And that allowed us to add value. And so that kind of started us on the knowing what we wanted to look for, which is a good leadership team in place, critical mass where we really felt like there was a team that could handle everything day to day. And that's, the idea to buy a business just came, quite honestly, from I couldn't figure out how to buy real estate. We tried.
Are you a reader of Bradley Sugar's books at all?
No.
I've got a couple books that I want to tell you about.
Would it tell me to buy real estate?
What's that? No. Okay. It's his book's called you'll have to excuse the kitschy title, but it's Billionaire in Training.
Okay.
And it's actually a phenomenal book.
Sweet.
The title, it kind of drives me nuts, but the content inside of the book is really good when it comes to buying, building, and selling businesses. It's a lot it's a lot of your methodology that you're probably applying right now. But I really liked the book. It was very interesting. And he's got a whole series that he wrote. And I've got cash flow and systems in my office right now.
Okay. I'm going to need to check that out.
I think you might appreciate them. So, and James, what about you? Talk to me about the future of 5-9s as we move forward and kind of close out here.
Well, the nice thing about the future of 5-9s right now is there's no artificial end date on it. There's no strategic plan that calls for an end. There's no, it is just growth on the horizon. And we have to, a part of the fun, and of course everything that you do in life comes from the fact that you get to participate in it. So 5-9s is one of those things where as 2020 closes out and hopefully 2021 is, I think in some ways it'll be a recovery period for some people, and in some ways you're going to have some rapid market growth in different sectors because of how things are taking advantage of what took place in 2020 next year. So we'll be pretty well positioned to keep an eye on future growth. We're looking at 2 more geographic locations right now. That always comes with planning for the people that we would hire in those areas. And I already have, in large part, the leadership team that's necessary to handle a larger business. So we want to give the leadership team a larger business to handle. And
that's cool.
It's, it's a great place. And we owe it to our people that have been with us for a long time. We owe it to all the people we're hiring right now. And we owe it to our customers. In our marketplace, everybody's getting bought up and changed around all the time. So having Five Nines be a local Nebraska business that, we've been around not really all that long for a business, but we've been around the entire industry for us. I mean, since managed services really got going for small business. So we're pretty steadfast there, and they know that if they sign a contract with us, that we're going to be the place and we're going to be the people that are taking care of that contract for them. So it's sort of a win-win for us and for the businesses that we're working with. And there's always things to worry about as you look into market changes and stuff, but there's a lot of things to be confident in too, and we're in a position that a lot of people would be pretty envious of in our place, in our space. Lots of opportunities available to us, so I'm looking forward to that. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but that's part of the fun of the whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Right. That's right. That not knowing.
Being prepped and ready to take care of opportunities is what always matters to everybody, and we're in that position. So anything that's sufficiently exciting that shows up, we should be in a position to decide if we want to do something with it. And that's about it.
I feel like
I don't plan on living anywhere else. I've got the house I need. I've got things settled for me. Okay. So the focus is really on the growth of the business and not a lot of changes there.
It's got to be fun, like putting, once you kind of get yourself taken care of, right? Helping everybody around you, change their life, whether it's their lifestyle that changes, whether it's the amount that they get to travel, what they get to provide for their kids. I mean, I know that that's something I'm really looking forward to, as well as I, kind of like, obviously, in the beginning, you're just trying to figure it all out, trying to get systems in place, trying to get people paid and everything like that. But I do look forward to that point to where it's like everything is about adding to and putting more on top of, in a really good way, those people, kind of just making their lives better in a significant, visible way, to where you start driving in the parking lot, you start seeing new cars come in. I mean, so like something as simple as that, like that's just a good feeling, knowing that like you're contributing to their lives in that way, in enough to where it actually affects their lifestyle. They're more than taken care of. Now they're improving their lives wherever they want.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that feels really good about, that's one of the big positives of the business ownership experience, right? Mm-hmm. Is you are making decisions that have an impact on that. And sometimes people will disagree with your decisions, but that's just all part of it's just all part of doing the best you can with who you are and what you got. And as Nick said earlier, there is a little bit of substance to a business getting to what Nick referred to as critical mass. We've heard different people throughout our careers tell us different sizes for what critical mass is.
So what is it?
Well, it depends probably on the industry and the things that you need. I know that Five Nines has achieved it for the style of business that we are today, which means we're in a position to afford ourselves to take some calculated risks on some opportunities in the future, because I don't have to sit there and figure out how to be sustainable where we're at today, and that's a really nice place to be.
Yeah.
To me, critical mass is, if one person left, how good a shape is the company going to be in? If even two, right? So, you asked. I think it's probably 30 to 40 people, because until you get to that point, you're so reliant on one producer or one owner or one manager or one thing, and until you're past that, that's not critical mass.
Just a redundancy.
Yeah, it's a resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this. A sustainable business looks like the ones that Nick purchased and what Five Nines has turned into. When they have leadership teams that are formed, that are part of the business, so the business can kind of run on its own, if you will, independent of ownership. That means that the business has the people in the right seats in order to make the decisions and keep things moving. When the business only has 40, maybe on up to 50 people in it, it's possible that the owner on top will see themselves as the focal point for all decisions in the company. Mm-hmm. And if they don't spend the money and put the time into, the personal investment into giving the business its own team to create future growth, then the business really does get it's sort of capped at the level that one person can manage and make the decisions for. And you see that happen a lot in 25 to 30 person companies where the business owner just won't get out of the way. And then you can't attract really fantastic decision makers to your team because they don't want to work for that kind of person.
No.
It's the genius with 1,000 helpers business.
The genius with 1,000 helpers. That is, there's not a better way to put that.
You don't want to you don't want to operate like a one-person show if your business has a bunch of different people's careers within it. You need growth and opportunity for everybody in the company as well.
Right.
And oftentimes you're able to hire experts that are far better at those kind of positions than you would be anyway. And I'm a terrific example of somebody that worked myself out of a job a long time ago because I am a good engineer, but I wouldn't function very well within anybody else's system. I consider myself completely unemployable. I'm very lucky to be in the position that I am. But part of that is because I've got a terrific team there, and that is what it really takes for the business to hit this, to hit that sustainability point to where the business can handle itself and be its own thing, and it's putting that executive team in place. So that's why I would agree. You got to get up to 50, 60, 75 people when you're fully funding those kind of teams, and hopefully those people are doing a great job.
That's good advice. Speaking of advice, I want to close the podcast out today with your top 3 pieces of business advice each. So whoever's ready can go. But 3 things that you would give to current business owners for advice, or startup business owners, people that are just thinking about getting started versus people that are currently in the marketplace.
We might have to alternate.
It's okay. 6 total.
I didn't prepare for this.
Oh my God.
I will say.
You've been giving it out the whole time, so you got it.
I never met somebody chasing money that found it. I'm sure that happens in California.
Whoa, man, that's fantastic. You said you weren't prepared for this?
Stand and deliver.
You're gonna drop bombs like that? Say that one more time.
Yeah.
Well, I've never met somebody chasing money that found it. I've met people that have tried, and they're usually not the kind of people you really want to work for. I think one of the fundamental problems with this whole entrepreneurial thing as an industry is it attracts people to it that just want to own something. They want to be the guy. They want to be a CEO. They want to have some big payout at the end of the day. That's not the mentality that creates a sustainable business. And so the entrepreneurial programs almost attract the wrong kind of person into them, because businesses aren't really founded by those kind of people. Businesses are founded by like technicians. I mean, people that have a specific skill. They're good at something. You're good at putting on a podcast. I'm sure all sorts of other stuff too, but you don't typically start a business being a business guy that it's just this entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
You're somebody that's good at something. You found a way to make $1 on it, and you're trying to figure out how to grow it from there. So you've said the word success several times here, and I'm sure I cringed when you did it, because it is such a different thing to different people. But whatever it is the result of the decisions that you made along your way. And as you're trying to grow the business, it is not something that you reach out and grab. It's not tangible. If money shows up, it shows up on the back end. The money is a trailing indicator of what you've been able to accomplish in business. It is not something that you're able to go out and get. It's when it starts showing up, it means a lot of other things went right. So you almost have to go into debt, investing in things to go right in order to generate success behind it. Success is in the wake, right? And I think everybody knows the people I'm talking about. You just, if they're going out, like billionaire in the making, I'm sure he wrote a great book, but I'm
the same way.
If you're going out there trying to find money, it is really hard to find it. It's like somebody trying to cheat on a test so they can get a good grade because they want the good grade. It's harder to study and learn the material, but then the test doesn't become the problem, and the grade doesn't become the problem because you already studied for it. If you try to figure out how to cheat on it, then the grade itself is risky. It's anyway. That's my first.
Have you read Man's Search for Meaning yet?
No. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, that's like one of the first paragraphs in the book. He talks about attracting success, and the harder you chase it, the more you push it away. And he says that in several different ways in the beginning of the book, and talking about how people just incessantly chase money and fame and cars and women and whatever else, and ultimately it's the last thing that they get.
I mean, I feel like just as James mic dropped on us.
He definitely mic dropped on us. You're gonna have to pick the mic back up.
Yeah. All right. I'll start with my first. And this was not me for the first 3/4 of my career, but drive into the storm. So, I'm a middle child, so there's definitely a strong tendency for me when I'm faced with difficult things to see whether I can drive around the storm. If I just ignore the problem or massage the problem a little bit or talk myself into thinking that doing these 4 things will make it better. And one of the things I've learned is, you can't make everybody happy all the time. And, when problems big and small are there, the more we put it off, the worse it gets. And driving into the storm is a really powerful tool. So doesn't mean drive into the storm angry. That rarely works. But drive into the storm. When there's a storm in front of you, just drive into it and navigate it and get it over with, whatever that is. Whether that's
good advice.
Problem employee or whatever that thing is, just hit it head on. Drive into it.
I like that very much. I'd say, and this is a good 2021, but everybody in the world, or at least everybody that is worrying too much. It seems like half our time is spent stressing about things that ultimately aren't going to be as bad as you end up thinking that they're going to be. And this happens to me all the time in business. I mean, I'll if I hear about something that might not have gone perfectly right for somebody, I'll worry that might be a lost account as a result of that, and that can completely stress me out. And then I sit there and I think to myself, all right, what changes would I make, and what would happen if that actually took place? And it turns out, we would survive that just fine. I don't want it to happen, but I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have to stress about it. And the reality is the bad thing almost never actually happens in the way that you fear it would. So I think people need to do what they can, mental health nowadays especially, to consciously not stress out about stuff out of their control, and just pay attention to doing a good job with what's within them. And I think that's something that's hitting a lot of people at the moment.
Yeah, being present.
Very much so. Well, that's probably a better summary than everything I just said. But
no, I'm just adding to it.
That's awesome.
That's good.
Let's see. Number 2. I mean, all right. This will sound goofy, because a side hobby my wife and I have is helping companies implement traction. Mm-hmm. And we call it a hobby because we love doing it. It's super fun.
You travel a lot to do it, don't you?
We travel quite a bit to do it.
Yeah.
The sales guy's been horribly bad about finding local clients. Awful at my job. It's too bad nobody can fire me. But it had an incredible effect on 5 Nines. it's funny, cobbler's kids have no shoes. Sure, my wife and I are implementing traction in these other businesses, and yet we hadn't done it in any of the 3 companies we've acquired. So now we're starting to do that, and even just instantly you see those same pieces of value. Traction's an incredible system. Read the book by Gino Wickman. It's amazing, and it's transformational. If companies really embrace it, it's super awesome.
Yeah.
I heart it really bad. That's my second one.
All right, last one for me, from small business advice perspective again. Very often, the real difference between a successful, flourishing company and a similar company that isn't is sort of the art of making decisions quickly. It's not too different than what Nick said about going into the storm. If you have a problem, tackle it head on. But it can be other things. You have to learn to make decisions quickly, and everybody knows this because everybody knows that pretty much anybody that you ultimately fire, everybody, it took too long to do it. One of the things I try to remind everybody is removing somebody that wouldn't be a good fit. And I know that's sort of a negative thing to talk about, but removing somebody that isn't a great fit for the position is delaying, not removing them, is delaying a wonderful opportunity for somebody that would be a good fit. Mm-hmm. And you owe it to both of them to make that decision sooner.
That's right.
So the person that you don't feel is a good fit can go find a good fit for themselves. And you're opening up that opportunity for somebody else, because that might be a life-changing opportunity for somebody else. And delaying the decision does nothing except for cripple the team and cripple the business around it. But there's personnel decisions is an easy way to have an example for that. But in general, better performing companies make decisions faster. Even if they make a wrong decision, they made it quicker, so they can undo it quicker. It's indecision that allows the marketplace and the things around you to start to dictate your future rather than the business staying in front of it.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Take calculated risks. So people think that as an entrepreneur, you constantly are taking big, giant risks. And in some ways you are, right?
Long-term you are.
In some ways, you're always at risk. Every day you open the door, you're at risk. That's true. But being smart about the risks that you're taking is a really important skill of an entrepreneur. And the analogy I use is I never jump without knowing how far down it is. Mm-hmm. So I always know what my worst case scenario is. And sometimes it's my worst case scenario of my worst case scenario. But it's the concept of it's okay to take risks. To take calculated risks means I know how bad it would be if this goes poorly, and I know how great it can go if it goes the way that I expect and want it to. And when you can think about that, it helps you understand, is this a giant risk where the bottom is I lose my business? Or is this a giant risk where the bottom is I lose $100,000? And if your bottom of your risk is $100,000, but your upside is, infinite or whatever that upside is, if you have the $100,000 sitting in the bank that you can afford to lose, those are the types of risks you take.
Right.
I think there is a over glorification of balls to the wall, put $60,000 on my credit card. I admire people that do that. I could never have done that, which is why I'm not a true entrepreneur. I know, and I admire that.
I did it too.
All I would say is once you get past that, and the point is take calculated risks. Understand, think about the upside, dream about the upside, and just know. Don't jump if there's clouds and you don't know how far down it is to the bottom. Know where the bottom is. If you don't know, then figure it out. Take the time to figure out what happens if this just goes crazy.
Right.
And
you always figure it out.
It's almost impossible to not know that. It's just we're lazy about that.
Yeah.
And all we have to do is take the time to say, how far down is it? How bad is it? And then we can make a smart decision. And almost always, betting on yourself tends to really work over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But know how far down it is.
I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. The only thing I could add to that is in business, sometimes taking risks has a time frame associated with them. Mm-hmm. So you can mitigate your risk by just saying, we're going to put this amount of money into this for 45 days. And we're going to make a better decision then, because risking the 45 days puts us in a position to make a better decision on, what might be a longer term commitment.
That's a great point. Put a timer on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can think about it that way. Sometimes...
But it's do it, right?
Right. Yeah, you have to do it, and sometimes you have to do something in order to gather enough information to be in a better position for it.
Yeah. Too many times we sit on the edge and we paralyze ourselves, and I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's worth taking take the few minutes to figure out what the risk really is. As James said, forward momentum almost always wins.
Yeah.
Almost always wins.
This has been solid, guys.
This is fun.
I feel like we're just like going back and forth with some of the best advice that's ever been given out here. So
it's 2 hours. I hope.
I
hope you can turn this into a 15-minute podcast.
We definitely went over, so I appreciate the extra time. It was good. No,
Thanks,
there's plenty of nuggets in here. And guys, that's gonna do it for another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and as usual, keep striking.